The job listing had been sitting on the board for 11 days. That was unusual. On Veyrath Orbital, contract work moved fast. Delivery routes got grabbed within hours, sometimes minutes. Contractors were always hungry for routes. More routes meant more pay. More pay meant a longer stay on the station. And a longer stay meant not going back to whatever cold corner of space they came from. 11 days was a long time for anything to sit unclaimed. Raildun noticed it on day 9. He was between routes, which was not a comfortable place to be, and he was scrolling through the board in the contractor lounge while Fan sat across from him eating something that smelled like burned rubber and called it lunch. That one's been up forever, Rail said, pointing at the listing. Fan looked over, then looked back at his food. Yeah. The pay's fine. Yeah. What's wrong with it? Fan chewed slowly. It's the nursery wing. The Dracover nursery wing. Rail read the listing again. 6 delivery drops per week. Nutrient protein canisters, specialized formula, temperature controlled. Drop point, Corridor 7, Bay Door 14. Access code provided on contract acceptance. No interaction required. No interaction permitted. So you just drop the food and leave, Rail said. You drop the food and leave as fast as possible, Fan said, without making eye contact with anything that has scales and is larger than a ground vehicle. The hatchlings are in a sealed nursery. The adults are in the diplomatic wing on the other side of the station. The clutch warden is not in the diplomatic wing. Rail had heard of clutch wardens. Every species with eggs had some version of the role. The Dracoveran version was, by all accounts, exactly what you would expect from a species that had been flying between stars before humanity had learned to write things down. Ancient, patient, and completely without tolerance for anything that looked at their charges the wrong way. I'll take it, Rail said. Fan stared at him. You'll take it. I need the route. You could find another route. This one's available now. Fan put down his fork. Rail, the last guy who had it, asked to be reassigned after 4 days. The guy before him requested a full station transfer. Station transfer. He left Veyrath entirely. What happened to them? Nothing happened to them. That's the point. Nothing happened, and they still left. The Dracoveran just looked at them, and they left. Rail accepted the contract that afternoon. His first delivery was on a Tuesday, or what passed for Tuesday on a station that ran on a 26-hour artificial cycle. He loaded the 6 canisters onto his carry cart, checked the temperature seals, confirmed the access code, and walked Corridor 7 alone. The corridor was quiet in a way that felt less like emptiness and more like held breath. The walls were standard station gray, but someone had added environmental panels near Bay Door 14, a low amber light, slightly warmer air, and a faint hum that Rail could feel more in his chest than hear with his ears. Whoever designed the nursery environment had done it carefully. Bay Door 14 was large. Much larger than a standard cargo bay. The door was sealed, and the access panel glowed faint green on the right side. Rail entered the code. The door did not open. A slot at the base of the door slid open instead, just wide enough for the canisters, one at a time. He slid them through. 6 canisters. Took less than 3 minutes. He was about to turn and leave when he noticed the ventilation gap near the top of the door frame. Standard station design, airflow regulation. The gap was narrow, maybe 2 fingers wide. There was an eye looking through it. It was not a small eye. It was not an adult eye, either. It was too bright, too wide, too openly curious for that. It had a silver gold tint to the iris and a pupil that was currently very round, the way pupils go when something is genuinely interested in what it is seeing. Rail looked at it for exactly 1 second. Then he nodded once, the way he would nod to anyone he was passing in the corridor, picked up his empty cart, and walked back the way he came. He logged the delivery when he got back to the contractor station. 6 units, temperature intact, received at Bay Door 14. No issues. He did not mention the eye. He told himself it was probably a young adult. Maybe a juvenile. The Dracoveran had several stages between hatching and full maturity, and he did not know enough about their biology to be certain what he had seen. But the eye had been very close to the gap, and the gap was near the top of the door, which meant whatever was looking through it was not tall. He thought about that for a moment. Then he stopped thinking about it, because thinking about it was not part of the job. He was a delivery contractor. He delivered things. That was the entire scope of his professional identity, and he was comfortable with that. He went home, ate a real meal, and slept without any trouble. On Thursday, he went back. Nobody on the station locked anything perfectly. That was just the nature of a place held together by contracts, maintenance schedules, and the assumption that most beings were too tired or too busy to cause trouble. Latches wore down. Seals loosened. A door that was rated for full containment on day 1 was rarely still rated for it by month 8. Bay door 14 had a latch problem. Rail noticed it on his 3rd delivery. The door had not swung fully open. It was just slightly ajar. A gap of maybe 30 centimeters near the lower left edge, where the latch mechanism had failed to seat properly. He could see the amber light from inside spilling into the corridor in a thin, warm line. He stopped. Standard protocol said, if access is available and safe, complete the delivery inside the bay to ensure proper canister placement. It was written into the contractor handbook specifically for situations where the drop slot was compromised or unavailable. He filed that logic away quickly and focused on what actually mattered. The door was open, and he had 6 canisters of temperature-sensitive nutrient protein sitting on his cart that needed to go inside. He pushed the door gently. It swung open another meter, just enough for him and his cart. He went in. The nursery bay was bigger than he expected. The ceiling was high, much higher than the corridor outside. The floor was covered in a material that was soft under his boots, not quite padding, but not hard either. The lighting was amber throughout, warm and low, the kind of light designed to be easy on young eyes. Along the far wall, there were 6 individual alcoves, each large enough to fit a vehicle, each lined with something dark and fibrous that looked like it had been woven by hand. In front of those alcoves were 6 hatchlings. They were not small. That was the first thing Rail registered. He had carried some mental image of something the size of a cat or a large dog. The smallest one in the group came up to his hip. The largest was closer to his shoulder. They were looking at him. All 6 of them, perfectly still, completely silent. Their scales caught the amber light in different ways, blue-green on 2 of them, pale silver on 1, deep teal on another, and a color on the last 2 that Rail could not name easily, something between gold and copper depending on how they moved. Their eyes were large and bright, pupils wide in the low light. Nobody moved for a full 3 seconds. Then the silver one walked forward. It moved with careful, deliberate steps. Not aggressive, not afraid, curious, in the way that very young things are curious when they have not yet learned to be cautious about the world. It stopped about 2 meters from Rail and lowered its head, angling it sideways to look at him better with one large eye. Rail did not step back. He did not step forward. He held the canister he was carrying with both hands and did not make any sudden movements. The silver hatchling looked at the canister, then at Rail, then at the canister again. Rail very slowly, very carefully, crouched down and set the canister on the floor in front of him. Then he straightened back up and took 1 step to the side, putting a little more space between himself and the food. The silver hatchling looked at the canister for a moment longer. Then it walked forward, sniffed it twice, and made a sound, short, sharp, high, like a bird call, but lower. The other 5 immediately became less still. Rail spent the next 6 minutes placing each canister in its correct alcove. He had memorized the placement from the contract documentation. Each alcove was numbered. Each number corresponded to a specific formula. He moved steadily and without rushing, and the hatchlings watched him the entire time. 2 of them followed him from alcove to alcove at a distance of about 3 meters, their heads tracking him with the focused attention of animals that were very good at watching things. He did not talk to them. He did not reach toward them. When the silver one came close enough to sniff his boot, he stood still and waited until it lost interest and moved away. When all 6 canisters were placed, he picked up his empty cart and walked back to the door. He stopped at the threshold and looked back once. 6 hatchlings, all watching him leave. He walked out. The door fell almost closed behind him, latch still failing quietly to seat. At the contractor logging station, he wrote, "Standard drop. 6 units, temperature intact. Received at bay door 14. No issues." In the nursery monitoring room 3 corridors away, Sorva watched the footage on a screen no larger than her forearm. She was old enough that very little surprised her. She had tended 3 generations of broodlings. She had removed uninvited station crew from the wing perimeter more times than she could count, using nothing but her presence and the particular quality of her silence. She watched the human move through the bay. Methodical, careful, completely calm. She watched Vasa, the silver one, always the boldest, follow him from alcove to alcove. She watched him stand still when Vasa sniffed his boot. Sorva's claws tapped the edge of the desk once. Slowly. She did not file a report. She did not call anyone. She queued the footage for review and set a monitoring alert for the next delivery window. Then she went back to her rounds. Rail had a system for his mornings. Not a complicated one, just a sequence that worked. He checked his route sheet while his food heated. He ate standing at the counter. He left early enough to avoid the shift change crowd in the main corridors. It was not a remarkable system. It simply worked, and things that worked quietly were worth keeping. On day 7 of the nursery route, he arrived at corridor 7 at the usual time. Bay door 14 was open. Not accidentally. He could tell the difference now. When the latch failed, the door settled inward at a slight angle, with a gap at the lower left. This time the door was pulled inward evenly from the center, standing open about half a meter. The latch had been pushed back manually from inside. Someone had opened it for him. He stood in the corridor for a moment, card in hand, thinking about that. Then he walked in. They were lined up. All 6 of them, in a loose row, roughly 2 meters from the door. Not perfectly straight. The 2 blue-green ones were standing closer together, and the gold-copper pair were slightly behind the others, but it was clearly a row, clearly deliberate. They were facing the door. They had been waiting. Rail had seen many things in his time on Veyrath Orbital. He had delivered cargo to species that communicated through color changes in their skin, to species that had no visible eyes, to species that smelled strongly of ammonia and did not consider this anyone else's problem. He had developed, over the years, a professional flatness to his reactions. Most things did not surprise him in any visible way. This came close. He kept his face neutral and walked to the first alcove. Vasa, the silver one, fell into step beside him immediately. 3 meters back, the same distance as last time, like she had decided that 3 meters was the correct following distance and committed to it. The large teal one, which Rail had started thinking of as watcher because it always stayed at the back and always watched, did not move from the row. It just turned its head to track him. Rail placed each canister in its alcove, same as always. Correct formula in the correct spot. He checked each temperature seal before placing it. He did not rush. On the 5th canister, something changed. One of the blue-green hatchlings made a low sound and stepped forward. Not toward Rail, toward the alcove he had just left. It went to the canister he had placed there, looked at it, then looked back at him. Rail looked at the canister, then at the hatchling. He checked the placement against his mental map of the delivery chart. Alcove 3, Formula 3. He had placed it correctly. The blue-green hatchling made the sound again, softer this time. Rail checked again. The formula number on the canister matched the alcove number. He held up the canister slightly, so the label was visible, then set it back exactly where he had placed it. Then he spread his hands, palms up, an open gesture, universal in its way. The blue-green hatchling looked at him for a long moment. Then it went to the canister and started eating. He placed the last canister in alcove 6. When he straightened up and turned around, he found that 3 of the 6 hatchlings were now within 2 meters of him, including Vasa, who had closed the gap from 3 meters to about 1. He looked at them. They looked at him. Rail did something he had not done in either of the previous visits. He sat down on the floor. Not because of any strategy or plan. His feet were tired. He had been on shift since early, and the cart wheels were poorly calibrated and required more effort than they should have. He sat cross-legged on the soft floor material and rested his arms on his knees and looked at the wall. The hatchlings went very still. Then, slowly, Vasa walked forward and sat down too. Not the same way. She folded her legs beneath her in the Drac-hovern resting position, which put her head roughly level with Rail's. She looked at him from that distance, about half a meter now, with great seriousness. One of the blue-green ones came and sat to his left. Then the other. The gold-copper pair stayed where they were, but settled into their own resting positions, watching. Watcher did not move from the back of the room. Rail sat there for 90 seconds. He counted, because he was aware that he had a job to do and a schedule to keep, and that whatever was currently happening was not technically on the route sheet. Then he put his hands on his knees, pushed himself up to standing, picked up his cart, and walked to the door. He looked back once. All 6 were still sitting. Vasa's head was tilted. He left. 3 corridors away, Sorva was no longer watching alone. She had called Quell 2 hours ago, before the delivery window even opened. She had not told him why. She had just said, "Come to the monitoring station and watch." Quell was very old. He had negotiated trade agreements that had lasted 200 years. He had spoken in front of councils that held the fates of populated systems. He had not been surprised by anything in a very long time. He watched the footage from the current delivery in full silence. When it ended, he said nothing for almost a minute. Then, "Who is this human?" Sorva said, "A delivery contractor. He has been on this route for 7 days." Quell watched the still image of Rael sitting on the nursery floor, surrounded by broodlings, staring at the wall like it was a perfectly ordinary thing to do. "Pull his file," Quell said. "I want everything." In the contractor lounge, Rael was eating dinner when his work console pinged. A message from station administration. Brief. He read it twice, then put it down. Administrator Dren had flagged his access log. She had noted that he had been inside the nursery bay on 2 separate occasions. She wanted to discuss the situation. She noted that no interaction with the Dracoven broodlings was contractually permitted. She also noted that she was not yet filing an official incident report. Fan read the message over his shoulder. "You went inside?" "The door was open." "You went inside the Dracoven nursery." "I placed the canisters in the alcoves. Like the protocol says." Fan stared at him. "Are you still alive?" "I am eating dinner." Fan sat back. "This is going to become something," he said. "I want you to know I called it right now." Rael ate his dinner. He was not sure Fan was wrong. Dren had a very specific fear response. It did not involve shouting or running or any of the more dramatic options. It expressed itself as an extremely organized desk. When she was calm, her desk was a reasonable amount of untidy. When she was worried, everything was in a folder. When she was very worried, the folders were labeled. When Quell requested a formal meeting with station administration regarding the nursery access incident, she created a filing system. Rael arrived at her office at the requested time and sat in the chair across from her desk. He was wearing his contractor uniform. He had brought nothing with him because he had not anticipated needing anything. Dren explained the situation in the careful, measured tone of someone who had rehearsed the conversation several times. The Dracoven elder had reviewed the nursery footage. He was aware that a human contractor had been inside the nursery bay on 2 occasions. He was requesting that Rael be removed from the route immediately and reassigned. "I understand," Rael said. Dren blinked. She had prepared for several possible responses. That had not been one of them. "You're not going to argue," she said. "It's their nursery. If they want a different contractor, they get a different contractor." He paused. "Did they find someone reliable for the route?" "The formula has to be temperature controlled, and the canisters have to go in the right alcoves in the right order." Dren stared at him. Yes, I'll make sure whoever takes it is briefed properly. Alcove 3 gets the lighter formula. One of the broodlings seems to prefer it even though it's not assigned to Alcove 3, so whoever delivers might want to check that the right one ends up eating the right food. She wrote that down, which she had not planned to do. "Is that everything?" Rael said. "Yes," she said. "That's everything." He left. Quell had the reassignment authorized before the end of the shift. A different contractor accepted the route. The pay was good. The listing made no mention of the previous 2 incidents, and the new contractor had no particular feelings about dragons in any direction. Her name was Wes, and she was thorough and professional and had 12 years of delivery experience across 6 different station types. She arrived at Bay Door 14 the following morning. The door was closed. The drop slot at the base opened when she entered the access code. She loaded the canisters through, one at a time, and left. That was fine. That was how it was supposed to work. She came back 2 days later. Same process. Drop slot, 6 canisters, done. Sorva reported to Quell the next evening. She did it without expression, the way she delivered all her reports, because Sorva considered the careful separation of observation and opinion to be a fundamental professional virtue. The broodlings had eaten half their allocation on the first delivery. They had eaten a quarter of their allocation on the second. Vasa had not touched her canister at all. Quell sat with that information for a long time. He was not a being who made decisions quickly. Speed was for emergencies, and emergencies were usually the result of someone not thinking carefully enough earlier. He had spent 200 years making slow, correct decisions, and he was not interested in changing his approach now. But a broodling refusing food was not a small thing. It was not a preference or a mood. In Dracovern biology, hatchlings in their first cycles ate consistently and well. Their hunger was constant and necessary. A broodling that stopped eating was a broodling that was communicating something, and that something was never good. He called Sorva back. She came to his chamber and stood before him, hands clasped, waiting. "You want to say something?" he said. "I have already said what was relevant to the report," she said. "Say the other thing." A pause. "The Dracovern word for what I want to say is older than this station, older than our presence in this system. Say it anyway." Sorva was quiet for a moment. The broodlings chose. They arranged themselves before the human arrived. They waited. This was not something that happened to them. It was something they decided. In our oldest traditions, a broodling's early instinct is not something we question. It is something we pay attention to. Quell said nothing. "To deny what they chose," Sorva continued, "is to say that we know better than the instinct that has guided our young since before we had words. I will not tell you that the Elder Council is wrong. That is not my place. I am telling you what I observed, and what our own traditions say about what I observed." Quell looked at his hands for a long moment. "File nothing," he said finally. "I will review the historical records myself tonight." She left. He did review them. He spent most of the night on it, pulling documentation from the cultural archive that he had not opened in 40 years. There were 17 recorded cases of Dracovern broodlings forming an unsolicited bond with a non-Dracovern creature. The records were old, and the circumstances were different in every case. A creature from a flooded world, a being made entirely of sound, once something that had no physical form at all. In every case, the elders of the time had paid attention. In 15 of the 17 cases, paying attention had led somewhere worth going. Quell closed the archive and sat in the dark for a while. Then he sent a message to Dren. He did not send it as an order. He sent it as a request. That distinction mattered to him, and he suspected it would matter to the administrator as well. The message said, "Please ask the previous contractor if he is willing to return to the nursery route." Dren read the message at her desk, surrounded by her labeled folders. She wrote to Rail. He was in the middle of a different delivery, a crate of calibration equipment for the engineering bay on level 4. He read the message standing in the corridor, crate on his cart, other contractors walking past him on both sides. He replied, "Sure. Does the route still pay the same?" Dren stared at the response. She wrote back, "Yes." His reply came in under a minute. "I can start tomorrow morning." She put the message in a folder. She did not label it. She did not know what label would even fit. Quell had requested the meeting in neutral space, a small conference room on level 2, used mostly for contractor briefings and the occasional interspecies administrative discussion. It had plain walls and a table that was too large for 2 people and chairs that were sized for species considerably broader than either Rail or Quell. Rail arrived first. He sat in one of the oversized chairs and waited. Quell arrived with no announcement and no escort. He was larger than Rail had expected, though not enormous for a Dracovern of his age. His scales were a deep blue that had gone almost gray at the edges in the way that very old things sometimes lost their original color. He moved slowly and without any apparent urgency, which Rail had come to understand was not a sign of weakness in the Dracovern. It was something closer to the opposite. He sat across the table and looked at Rail for a long moment without speaking. Rail waited. He had no particular anxiety about silence. "I have been told," Quell said finally, in clear station standard language with only a slight roughness to certain sounds, "that you did not object when you were removed from the route." "It was a reasonable decision," Rail said. "Most humans in your position would have argued, filed a grievance, cited the contract terms. The broodlings are yours. If you didn't want me near them, you didn't want me near them." Quell looked at him the way Rail had noticed the hatchlings sometimes looked at things, a full, unhurried assessment, taking in more than just the surface. "And yet you came back when asked. The route pays fine. Is that the only reason?" Rail thought about it honestly. "No," he said. Quell waited. "The food has to go to the right alcoves in the right order. The formulas are different. The new contractor didn't know that Alcove 3's broodling sometimes takes from the wrong spot. Small thing, but it matters over time. You get nutritional gaps in a growing animal, and they're hard to correct later. Quell was quiet for a moment. You noticed that on the second delivery. Second time I was inside. And you said nothing in your delivery log. Didn't seem like my place to say things in the log about what the broodlings prefer. I just kept an eye on it. Quell looked at the table. He had the expression of someone doing a calculation. I want to understand something, he said. And I want you to answer without concern for how the answer sounds. What did you do to earn their attention? Rail thought about that for a moment. Not because he did not know the answer, but because he wanted to say it correctly. Nothing, he said. I came at the same time. I put the food where it was supposed to go. I didn't crowd them. I didn't try to get close. He paused. The first time I went in, the door was open and I had canisters to deliver. The second time, they were waiting. I just did the job. You sat with them, Quell said. The third visit. My feet were tired. Quell looked at him. Your feet were tired. I'd been on shift for 3 hours. A long silence. Why did the food matter to you? Quell said. It came out less like a question and more like something he had been thinking about for a while and was finally saying aloud. It is standard contract work. You are paid the same whether the food reaches the alcoves in the correct order or not. Whether the broodlings eat well or develop gaps. As you said, that is not your professional concern. Why did it matter? Rail looked at the table for a moment. Because something was waiting for it, he said. The room was quiet. Quell sat with that answer for long enough that the station's ventilation system cycled once, and Rail heard it move through the walls around them. Rail said nothing. Sorva has it. Quell continued. I have met perhaps 12 beings in my life who had it. Every one of them was Dracoveran. He looked at Rail. I am revising that number. Rail was quiet for a moment. I'm a delivery contractor. Yes, Quell said. I know what you are. He stood, and the motion was slow and careful in the way of something that had learned to take care of itself over a very long time. The route is yours. You will not be removed again. He paused at the door. The third broodling from the left. The large one, the one that stays at the back. Watcher, Rail said, and then immediately looked like he wished he had not. Quell turned slightly. You named it. Just in my head. To keep track. Watcher, Quell repeated. He seemed to turn the word over. That one is called Dravan in our tongue. It means the one who remembers what it sees. He looked at Rail. You were not entirely wrong. He left. Rail sat in the too large chair in the too large room for another minute. Then he picked up his cart from the corridor outside and went back to work. He told Fan about it that evening. He left out the part about Watcher because it embarrassed him slightly. Fan listened to the whole thing with wide eyes and did not eat his food. When Rail finished, Fan said, An elder told you that you have a quality that almost no beings in the galaxy have. He said something like that. And your reaction is to go back to delivering food. That's the job. Fan picked up his fork. Put it down again. I cannot tell if you are the most humble person on this station or the most oblivious. Rail ate his dinner. He was fairly sure it was neither. 3 weeks passed. Rail ran the route. Not because anything dramatic had changed. The route sheet was the same. The cart was still badly calibrated on the left wheel, and the access code for Bay Door 14 worked the same as it always had. The difference was that the door was open every morning when he arrived. Not accidentally. The latch had been repaired 2 weeks ago. He had noticed the new mechanism when he first saw it. Someone had made a decision about the latch, and the decision was, leave it open for him. He came at the same time every delivery morning. He placed the canisters in the correct alcoves. He checked that Vasa had not relocated any of the others, which she did sometimes, apparently as a form of entertainment. He corrected the placement when needed, without any particular reaction to the fact that a juvenile Dracoveran had rearranged his work. The hatchlings were always waiting when he arrived. Vasa was always in front, silver scales bright in the amber light. The 2 blue-green ones flanked her at slightly different distances because they had never quite agreed on what the correct following distance was. The gold-copper pair waited near their alcoves and watched the whole process with calm interest. And Dravan, Watcher, in Rail's private mental catalog, stayed at the back. Always at the back. Always watching. On the morning that turned out to be different from the other mornings, Rail arrived to find Sorva standing inside the bay. Not in the monitoring room behind the wall. Inside the bay itself, standing to the right of the door, hands clasped in front of her. Her gold scales caught the amber light and gave it back in warmer tones. She was watching the hatchlings, who were watching the door, and when Rail walked in, she did not look at him, but at the broodlings' reaction to him. They settled when he entered. Not the excited movement of animals responding to a stranger, the specific, quiet settling of creatures that had identified something familiar. Vasa moved forward. The blue-green pair shifted into their usual positions. Dravan's attention sharpened at the back without the rest of its body moving at all. Rail nodded once to Sorva, the same way he nodded to anyone he was passing in the corridor. Then he started the delivery. He placed each canister in its alcove. He checked Vasa's, which had been moved again, and moved it back. He stood still for a moment when one of the gold-copper hatchlings came forward and stayed within arm's reach of him for several seconds before retreating, which was new. He did not reach out. He waited. When it moved away, he continued. When all 6 canisters were placed and the cart was empty, he turned to leave. Sorva spoke. "You will continue the route," she said. Her voice was low and even. It was not a question. It was not exactly a statement either. It had the quality of something being formally recorded. "As long as the contract holds," Rail said. She was quiet for a moment. "It will hold." He nodded. He walked to the door. "Contractor." He stopped. He turned back. Sorva was looking at him directly for the first time in their acquaintance. Her eyes were a color that shifted between amber and gold depending on the light, and they were very clear and very old. "Dravan has not been close to a non-Dracovern since it hatched," she said. "It does not approach quickly. Even with me, it took 11 months before it came within 2 meters. She paused. "I reviewed the footage from this morning's delivery before you arrived." Rail did not say anything. "It came within 4 meters of you today," Sorva said. "Without you asking it. Without you reaching for it." A pause. "I thought you should know that," she said, and turned back to the broodlings. Rail walked out. 3 weeks after that, Fan was sitting in the contractor lounge reading something on his console when he made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a cough and stared at his screen. "What?" Rail said. "There's a communique," Fan said. "Official. From the Dracovern Diplomatic Office. Addressed to the Human Contractors Guild, Veyrath Orbital Chapter." He paused. "It commends you." Rail drank his coffee. "It says, and I'm reading this from the actual official document, that the Guild is in possession of one contractor whose presence demonstrates a quality for which they have provided the Dracovern word, which the translation software is calling. It's given 3 options. Being present in a way that living things can feel. The quality of being worth waiting for. Or," Fan stopped. "Or what?" Rail said. Fan looked at the screen. "Worthy of being waited for." The lounge was quiet for a moment. "That's a lot of words," Rail said. "Rail, an interstellar diplomatic communique was sent about you. About you, specifically, by name. Does the route still pay the same? You are possibly the most honored delivery contractor in the history of recorded interstellar contact, and you are asking about the pay rate. It's a reasonable question." Fan looked at the communique again. "Read it once more." Then he put his console down and picked up his coffee, shaking his head with the quiet defeat of a man who had tried to make someone understand something and accepted that it was not going to happen today. Rail finished his coffee. He had a delivery in 40 minutes. The cart's left wheel was still badly calibrated, and he needed to requisition a replacement before end of shift, or it would still be badly calibrated tomorrow morning, and he had 6 canisters to carry. He wrote the requisition. He double-checked the temperature seals on the canisters. He left 10 minutes early. Bay door 14 would be open. They would be waiting. He had a job to do.